Welcome to Not Entirely Unlike Tea with Christine Collins. Hey there, it's Christine Collins, and I wanted to chat on a fun subject today that I have experienced and perhaps you have as well, and that is talking in your sleep. Now, there are many different varieties of what is known as parasomnia. So some people have other types of physical movements. For me, it has always been talking. And I thought it might be interesting to unpack some of the neuroscience behind this and also explore some of the psychology and perhaps deeper meanings of it. So sleep talking, which is also known as somniloquy, is one of the parasomnias that is considered to be a behavior that is not necessarily fully understood, but it is related to sleep stages. So while it can happen during any stage of sleep, it is the most common during transitioning between stages, especially between non-REM and REM sleep. So for me, I typically will have this experience as I am waking up from a dream. So I'll be sort of deeply embedded and engrossed in a dream where I'm not having this experience, but as I begin to emerge from the dream, sometimes I'm emerging because I'm upset about something, and that's also why I start talking, or in some cases yelling. I am trying to verbalize or articulate something, or I am trying to escape out of a situation. And the act of beginning to talk or shout is what wakes me up. Now, during sleep, the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for things like logic and self-control, is a little bit less active, and that reduction in activity may allow for vocalization in thoughts and in dreams. Some of that reduced inhibition is similar to what we experience in the hypnosis process as well, and I've talked about this before, where we have less brain activity in that prefrontal cortex, which is connected with things like logic, self-doubt, second guessing, and so having that reduction can allow for us to become more creative and imaginative, and certainly is connected to dreaming as well. Now, typically during sleep, the brainstem will paralyze most muscles during REM sleep that prevent us from acting out physically in some way in our dreams. But for people who talk in their sleep, that mechanism may be slightly altered or different in a way that allows for speech to happen. There are also differences in neurotransmitters. So there's a neurotransmitter known as GABA, which inhibits brain activity, and norepinephrine, which regulates arousal. And changes in those neurotransmitters can have an impact on whether people talk in their sleep or not. There can also be a genetic component in people who talk in their sleep where it tends to run in families. So that may all connect back into kind of some of these brain changes and differences in people who talk in their sleep. It can also be associated with brief arousal in brain activity, such that it's not quite enough to wake the person up, but it is enough for them to have their speech triggered, such as I described in having, a bad dream, or feeling like you need to kind of stand up for yourself, or you're trying to shout your way out of a situation, or perhaps there's something intrusive happening in your dream, and so the speech activation is triggered for you. And sometimes the incorporation of an external stimulus can also connect into why a person may respond vocally as opposed to not doing that. Now, there are lots of other perspectives on this. So that was kind of the neuroscience behind it and what's happening in the brain and in the physical body. But there are other views that involve spiritual communication. Some people think that it is a form of communicating with spirits, or a moment where the conscious mind is quiet, so then spiritual messages can come through. For some, there's a belief that the subconscious mind is revealing hidden truths or even suppressed thoughts. So perhaps you're saying things in that sleep process that you really want to say to that person in real life, and you can't for whatever reason, or you won't. And so it's coming out for you in your sleep, allowing you the opportunity to articulate and verbally express yourself in ways that perhaps you can't do in waking life. There may be unresolved psychological or spiritual issues that could represent sort of an unresolved conflict or an emotion. It may be a nice sign for you, like a sign signpost kind of pointing to issues that are actually troubling you at a subconscious level that you may not have otherwise been aware of, and now you have the opportunity to address them. In some cases, it can be associated with beliefs around out-of-body experience or astral projection, where the individual's consciousness is traveling outside of the physical body and interacting. And in some cases, people might look at it as a spiritual experience where the higher self or the soul is communicating something important to the conscious mind that needs to be recognized or understood. So there are clearly a variety of different interpretations as to why sleep talking happens, everything ranging from the scientific to the spiritual. But ultimately, just as I say when it comes to analyzing dreams themselves, the most important factor in diagnosing or understanding that experience is to ask yourself what it means to you and for you, because I don't think that there is a universal explanation for a dream, for example. So when we're analyzing dreams, while it can be interesting and relevant to look at things symbolically, because our subconscious mind is absolutely a symbolic conversationalist, symbols can be very important and very relevant, but there's not necessarily a universal descriptor for each of those symbols. What makes the most sense is identifying the emotional aspect or component for you or for the specific dreamer in question, to analyze, to assess what is it that this experience reminds you of, perhaps in your waking life. So as an example, someone who is experiencing being in some type of a vehicle, a car, an airplane, a bus, or something like that, and it's going off of a cliff or it's going into the water, what is the emotional component to that? So not the physical representation, but what is the emotional experience? It's a feeling trapped, perhaps feeling suffocated, perhaps feeling like you don't have agency. Someone else is driving the vehicle, feeling as if you're not in control of a situation or having agency within your own life. So unveiling that emotional discovery can often be far more important than trying to take apart, well, the car represents this and the water represents that, but actually dissecting it in a way that is emotionally relevant to that dreamer. And so I would say the same could be true when analyzing sleep talking in terms of what is that experience actually like for the dreamer. Is it empowering, for example, versus unempowering? So are they having an experience where they are speaking to someone, perhaps telling someone off, perhaps defending themselves or standing up for themselves in a way that they don't do in their waking life? To me, that would be far more useful to analyze and relevant versus specifically dissecting the words or the language or even the individual. Sometimes the dream will be about a specific individual or situation, and sometimes it might be more symbolic or representative of an overall feeling that that person has, that they're perhaps not standing up for themselves, or they feel threatened in some way, or perhaps the situation or the scene is threatening to them in some way and they're using their voice to get out of that. So I think it's very interesting and fascinating when we start to dissect some of these things that are more at a subconscious level, that are not necessarily fully understood, and beginning to take apart the pieces and to look inside of it from the experience of the dreamer versus the analytical, purely scientific method, which is completely relevant and useful, but actually looking at it from the experience of the person who's having the experience, the phenomenology of it. So I hope you found this to be interesting and thoughtful, and until we connect the next time, I wish you a most magical and creative rest of your day. Thanks for listening. This is Christine Collins at transformcreate.com.